Well, it's I'm so pale that if I didn't wear some bright clothes, I'd look like a photographic negative. But we're dealing with a real live murder mystery here in Chester County.
What's going on?
A man called Tyler Terry, and that is not the creator of Medea, but he apparently has some connection to this area, and he is on the loose because he took up with a local lady and tried to kill a couple people, including one out at the Taco Bell on the bypass. And then they got in the car and they drove 700 miles to St. Louis and shot two people to death. And then they turned around and came back. And then his female companion's husband turned up dead in a ditch out in the county. And the cops have now got her, and they're still looking for him. He may or may not be out in the eastern part of the county where there are a lot of big hunting reserves. So a lot of woods, places to hide.
Doesn't have a tiger with him, does he?
Pardon?
He doesn't have a tiger with him, does he?
Not that we know of, but he has so far stolen a backhoe and a golf cart, and is rumored not to be wearing shoes. So needless to say, in a small town, people get revved up about things like this. Now, me, as far as I'm concerned, today could be 1874.
I love the pictures you're posting on Facebook of your sidewalks that you're finding, your brick-laid sidewalks. How interesting.
I tell you what, people ask me what I garden, and I say bricks. Everywhere I turn, another one turns up. And so it's fascinating to try and figure out what they were and when they got put in.
How long have you lived in this home?
I moved here 3 years ago. Okay. I got tired of living in Charlotte, and my friend Fred Powell, whose family has owned this home for 50 years and who has lived in this area for a couple of centuries, he's a minister in Florida, and the house was sitting empty and being broken into, and there's 7 acres of gardens and lawns that were going to rack and ruin. So I said, Fred, this is the offer of a lifetime. I want to come down and be your gardener, and I'll pay you to do it. And Fred, who is not a foolish man, said, that sounds like a deal. And so after 3 years, we have finally kind of turned a corner in terms of pulling up weeds and vines and cutting down dead trees to where I now know what I'm doing. And I'm starting to restore some of the old beds that I've found and basically doing the boy archaeology thing with everywhere. Before I dig anymore, I get my shovel out and I just stamp it into the ground. And if it pings, then it means there's brick I got to dig up.
So have you had a chance to do any research on the history of the home or go back and look at any?
Unfortunately, though, it's historic in the sense that it's old. We believe it was built about 1835. It has only had 4 owners, and they were not really historic.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell them.
So they didn't leave a lot of records, and none of them really became famous. They just lived here. Like the last family, before the Powells bought it, the Mills family, they bought it in 1872 and lived in it for nearly 100 years through 2 generations.
You haven't found any bones yet, have you?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
My husband worked for the Gilliard Project in Charleston, and they found bones. They found several bodies buried there. They found cannonballs. They found some ordnance from the Civil War that had to be secured because it was, still viable. But the bones they found were slaves, and of course they were. I think the university came in and did an archaeological dig and preserved bodies or the bones and reinterred them. But it was. I mean, there's a lot of history around Charleston.
This property originally was 900 acres. It was a cotton plantation, and Springs Mills bought most of it in World War II to turn into a war plant. and a mill village to support it. So there could be things like that out there. I know that the plantation back in the days of the Walker family before the Civil War had a very large slave population. And indeed, in 1860, there were 4 times more slaves than there were white people in Chester County. It was just astonishing the amount of slave labor there was.
Yeah.
I see that Lee and Minion have joined us. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. Good morning. We're here.
Hey,
it's not
welcome.
morning here.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, ladies. Good day, ladies.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, why don't I introduce my guest?
Please.
This is Mignon Franklin Ballard. She's a Calhoun native who lived, how many years did you?
I lived almost 40 years.
40 years in Fort Mill, South Carolina. And so, Lynn, she's kind of in your neck of the woods for a long time. And she's returned. How long have you been back in Calhoun?
8 years.
8 years ago. We were thrilled to get her back. There was a lot of rejoicing among her friends and fans in Calhoun when she came back. And she is the author of 22,
I think.
22.
I think it's
22.
22.
23.
Well,
Maybe
whatever.
so. A lot. Over 20 novels, most of which her publicity thing terms Southern mysteries, but they're not of the Gothic type we were talking about last week, including 2 series, Augusta Goodnight, who is an angel, and Miss Dimple. And you can't see them probably. I have a little display of some of her books over here on my bookcase behind us. So she's going to tell us about some of her earlier books, but we're also going to talk about her latest book, which is really a departure from these series and from her other standalone books. So we're delighted to have her here. And
well, we're always
joining.
delighted to have an author. You know, we have such great guests on this show. We have book artists and book designers and autograph specialists and illustrators, but none of this is possible without the author. If we don't have
That's
a book to begin with, we've got nowhere to go.
That's true. That's true.
But we're glad to have you,
happy
Minion.
to accommodate.
And on behalf of the rest of our viewers and our eventual listeners during this week, welcome to all of you for the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. Good morning, everybody. The Rare Book Cafe is the only weekly live stream program on the internet devoted entirely to rare and collectible books and the people who love them, and that's you, Y-O-U. Here we are every Saturday from 12:30 Eastern to 9:30 Pacific. That's where I am. That's why I'm confused. And 5:30 Greenwich Mean Time. We're live streaming on YouTube and Facebook as I speak. And then at the end of the show, our executive producer, Alan Smith, turns it into a podcast, which you can find on most any podcast platform, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever fine podcasts are given away for free. We're a virtual cafe, accessible anywhere in the world, any time of the day, and everybody's welcome, especially those of you who love books. With me today is our special guest, Mignon Ballard, who writes murder mysteries, and her friend and our cafe regular, Lee Lynn. Also, our associate producer, Lynn Thompson, is here with a live segment. Joining us live later will be our favorite Shakespeare illustrator, Mary Kay Watson, finishing up her stories about a real-life murder in her home state of West Virginia. And that's the theme of our episode today, Murder Loves Company. And we've got lots of company live with you today. If you're watching this show live, leave me a note, leave your questions right there on the side panel, and we will address them. Before we start, I should mention that we are a live stream program. So all of the bloopers and mistakes I made can be reheard during the week when you play us pre-recorded. We're not trying to trick anybody there. We've got a couple of segments that are pre-recorded. Later in the show, we're going to have David Hess from the Bookman Bookstore in Orange, California, with his popular feature, Things Found in Books. Live with us today is Lynn Thompson. Lynn, are you still with us? for the story behind the story. Who are you sharing with us this week, Lynn? Who's behind your story? Well, Lynn must have popped off, but we'll have him back on in a moment and find out. But first, today, we're going to start off Murder Loves Company. What's better than a murder mystery? A detective series, a whodunit, a she did it, he did it. Maybe just like on the Orient Express, all 10 of them did it. Well, we're going to find out. Another one and another one, and we have a whole collection of them. Author Minion Bauer, who's been writing longer than many of us have been alive, certainly longer than me. She lives in Calhoun, Georgia, not far from our friend Lee Lynn. Lee, introduce your friend.
Okay, be glad to. This is Mignon Ballard, and she's been writing for a long time, long enough to have completed 23 novels, and has other writing experience as well as the books that she has published. You said in your biography that you thought you always wanted to be a writer. And I know from when we had your sister's handwritten cookbook on, she didn't think you were capable of being a cook,
No.
but didn't express any reason that you couldn't be a writer. What did you take to achieve this? Maybe starting with your journalism degree from University of Georgia.
Well, that certainly was a big step in the right direction. Mainly when I was at Georgia, I worked on the Red and Black, which was the student newspaper, still is. And it was wonderful because it taught you not to use too many words you don't need, unnecessary words. You just get right to the point. Of course, when you write mysteries, you can sort of elaborate a little bit, or any other novel, but that was a wonderful training. And also in high school, I worked on the high school newspaper too. And until that time, I did not know. I've always wanted to write. I can't do anything else. Until that time, I didn't know that you could major in writing. Everybody majored in nursing or home economics or secretarial science. I didn't like any of that. I just couldn't do it. So when I was on the school newspaper, our advisor had graduated from journalism school, and I said, "You mean you majored in writing?" And he said, "Oh, yes." Well, yippee. So here I am. I couldn't wait.
And you worked for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution?
Briefly, yeah. I worked on the women's page.
The women's page.
Yeah. And I also worked for the Calhoun Times. That was a better experience because you got to do everything.
Yeah. Many of our reviewers, some are either writers or they'd like to be writers. How difficult was it to get your first book published?
Very difficult. It took a long time. The first book I had published was Aunt Matilda's Ghost, which was the only other children's book I've ever written. I've written two. This, my present one, and that one.
And hold on just a second. Alan, you want to show the picture of Aunt Matilda's Ghost? Maybe? Maybe not.
Well, anyway.
Okay. Go ahead.
Anyway, it was a thrill, and it was 8 years after that one that I sold the second novel, and that was Raven Rock, which was a suspense novel for adult readers. And there's Aunt Matilda. Yeah,
there's Aunt Matilda. And I think do we have Raven Rock? I don't remember. When I found Raven Rock to be rather suspenseful.
It was.
There were scary parts in Raven Rock.
It was scary. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I had a good time writing that. My editor was with the company is not here anymore. Dodd Mead in New York. They published a lot. They published Agatha Christie. They published all the early mystery writers, most of them, and that's where I sent Raven Rock, and they held it, and they held it, and they held it. And the editor was Margaret Norton, and she was probably about the age I am now, which I'm not talking about, but she'd been there a while. And finally, I called her, and I said, Miss Norton, you've had my book, for so long. What are you going to do? She said, well, we're thinking, it's going to take us a while. We're thinking about it, but it'll be a while. Well, 6 weeks went by, and I said, I did a little praying. I said, God, if you will let them take that book, I'll quit smoking. And when she called me about 6 weeks later and said that they are going to take the book. And she said, well, I forgot what the advance was. It was something like $2,000. And she said, is that all right? And I just thought, oh, do you want me to pay you? But it was wonderful. So I did quit smoking. It took me a week, but I was afraid to go back on my word, so I did.
It just took God about 6 weeks to get that all taken care of.
Yeah.
What year was that?
I think it was 2080. No, wait a minute. No, that's not. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was about 2080 or around in there.
1980. We tend to correct each other a lot.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm old. Both of us do it. I personally love Augusta Goodnight. How'd you come up with an angel as a sleuth?
Who don't want an angel?
Well, that's true.
That's
true.
She cooked. She cleaned house. She was fun. Her last assignment had been in the 1940s. So when she came back, she had been in the heavenly, fields between those times. When she came back, she thought it was still wartime. She thought everything was rationed. And she was funny because she would get things quoted wrong. And she dressed in these wild clothes. I just enjoyed her thoroughly. And I think there were, 7 in that series.
And we probably have some pictures of, I'm not sure what all we have pictures of. Alan,
while we're pulling up pictures, I'd like to ask a question here. You wrote 7 books with the same main character. What is your relationship like? You must be like a sister or a best friend, or what's your relationship with that character?
Well, she was like a best friend. I mean, who wouldn't want a best friend that comes to your house and does the cooking, and she's funny. She doesn't hold any grudges against you. And also, I changed locations. The first books were in different locations. Then I finally decided to stay in one town because I wanted to get to know the characters in that town. And finally, after about, I think 4, I can't remember, I moved her to a certain town.
Did you ever find yourself outlining the next book while you're halfway through writing the one you're in the middle of?
Well, you get not necessarily outlining, but you get ideas about where I can go with this.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So I don't know where the pictures are, but anyway, here we go. Okay, here's one of the Miss Dimple ones.
Yeah, that's where I combined the
two.
Yeah.
Tell us about Miss Dimple.
Miss Dimple taught the first grade in 1940s. So I remember the 1940s, and so I went to school in the 1940s, and I went to the first grade in the 1940s. So Miss Dimple is the kind of teacher that everybody needs to have. She was wonderful, and Miss Dimple Kilpatrick. I set that story, and I didn't name the town, but it's set in Calhoun, but I don't call it Calhoun. The school building was the one I went to school in. She lived in a teacher's boarding house, which is a block from where I grew up. It's gone now, but that's where all the teachers lived. And I just, I had such a good time with that series because I just knew Miss Dimple really well. And of course, some of the mysteries came along. There were bad things that happened, and Miss Dimple helped solve those problems.
Miss Dimple got in a lot of trouble.
She did. Yeah, she
She
did.
disappeared one time, didn't
Yes,
she?
she did. She did disappear.
yeah,
she was
she dis-
kidnapped.
Kidnapped. Yeah, she
but
did.
she didn't mess with them.
No, she
Lee, if I
didn't.
could ask another question, I'm just
Please
so fascinated by this topic. Living in being an author in a small town, do you ever have people come up to you and say, "Hey, could you write me into your next book?" Or do you ever have people come up to you and say, "Hey, I think that character in your book was old Mr. McDonald down on the farm"? Is that who you were Is that who you were talking about? People trying to guess who your characters really were?
Yes, I have had that. Definitely have had that. And people have come up and said, "You need to write about me. I have a really good background." And then, of course, in the Miss Dimple series, there was, one or two folks I put in there. I hope they're long gone.
Oh goodness. Her most recent book, though, which was one of the reasons that I wanted to do this today, is Alan. Can you show the picture of No Good Word for Goodbye? Because I want us to look at the cover of it. Well, maybe we can hold it up. Oh, no, there we go. There we go. Okay. The cover of this has a really charming painting. The building is it the print shop?
No, it's the courthouse.
It's the courthouse at New Echota, which was the last capital of Cherokee here. And tell us about the painting on the cover.
Well, recently, about a year and a half ago, I started taking watercolor painting from a friend in Rome, Georgia, which is about 30 miles away. And I enjoyed it so much. I really have sort of floundered around, but my teacher, Marilyn Lindholm, said, "I think you can do the cover of the book." And I said, "Oh, Marilyn, I'm not good enough to do that." She said, "Yes, you are." And she helped me with it. But we painted this together. But I did do the courthouse, and we painted it. It's a work of I don't know, love, I guess. But she wants to do a lot of flowers, and she put too many flowers in there. Now I took some of them out. But it was fun.
Tell us who the two little girls are.
The little girls are, the main characters in the book, and one is the little white girl who comes to live there, Nell, and the other is the little Cherokee girl who is her friend, and they become very good friends. Nell does not want to come and live in New Echota. Now, this one's not a mystery, I'll have to tell you. This is a historical novel. And Nell has forced to come to New Echota because of circumstances in her home. And she lives with the printer, who was a real man. He was a white man. His name was John Wheeler. And he lived in New Echota, and he ran the print shop. So I made him her uncle. So she lives with him, and she goes to school with the Cherokee children and becomes friends with a little Cherokee girl.
And I'd like to ask, I know when we had talked about this earlier, you had said that this was that you felt like this was an important book for you to write. Why did you feel this way, and why did you aim it at a young audience?
To answer your last question, I think children need to know the story of the Cherokee removal. It's a sad, sad history, but it's something that I think needs to be known. I think it needs to be taught. I grew up in Calhoun, and I knew that the Cherokees had lived here. We had a statue in our schoolyard of an Indian, and I found out later it was supposed to be Sequoyah who invented the Cherokee soliloquy, the alphabet. It looks nothing like Sequoyah, but we called him Sequoyah. He was on top of the water fountain in the schoolyard, and I found out later that there were statues made just like that all over the United States just to represent the Indians. But I grew up here knowing that the Cherokees had lived here. I didn't know where. All the time that I was learning to swim and having a good time in the swimming pool out in about 3 miles out of town, and there's a golf course out there, I didn't know that right across the road, that was the capital of Cherokee Nation. I didn't know that. I knew that there had been there, but I didn't know where it was. And the pool that I learned to swim in, which is still there, is spring fed, or it was. Cold as all get out if you went on Tuesday because they filled it on Monday. But right across the road was where the Cherokee capital of the was. So in the 1950s, they excavated. The archaeologists came and they did the excavations, and they found the foundations of the houses and the print shop and the buildings that had been there. The only house that is still there is the Wooster House, and that was a missionary house, and it was in bad shape, but it's certainly been taken care of. It's been reconstructed and it looks great. But they reconstructed the buildings, and the print shop is there. And the middle class cabin, my father was born in that, and it was not at New Echota. It was out off the Rome Road, and it had a wing that ran off. It was a log cabin, and it had a wing off the side. When they did this, he said, we used it as a tenant house. He said, I want that to go out to New Echota because it was built around 1830. And so it was at that time period, although Cherokees didn't live in it. So they took it apart board by board, and they lost a wing of it because of time, and erosion. But they reconstructed it at New Echota, and it's there now, and that serves as the middle class Cherokee cabin. And it has one great big room with a fireplace and a loft and a front porch. And I volunteer there, and I enjoy volunteering right there in that cabin where my daddy was born because he wanted it out there. And the Wooster House, Samuel Wooster figures prominently in the book due to a court case, and that is discussed in the book as well. And it would be a great assignment for like a 7th or 8th grade class to do a field trip, to read the book, to discuss what was going on at that time. Because, well, of course, the last year there haven't been school tours out to New Echota, but normally there are. And there's actually in a couple of weeks going to be a sunrise tour at New Echota. That if you can get up that early, I know it's like a lot of fun. You can get up that early.
Excuse me, Lee. I'd like to just throw a thumbs up in there for the genre of historical fiction. Minion said before that she thought that the history of the Cherokee Nation was important for young people to learn, and she's absolutely correct there. And but sometimes young people get hung up on history as a subject in school rather than something to stimulate the imagination. So Minion's effort to combine the history of the Cherokee people along with a girlish friendship was really a great approach to take.
Thank you. One thing that I was impressed with when I read the book was the attention to detail in the story. I mean, I live here, and so I'm familiar with the names of roads and communities and, rivers and things like that are mentioned in the book. And so somebody who doesn't live here might not notice that, but I know one thing in historical fiction, frequently the locations don't have much to do with history, or with real life. And the flowers and what's blooming when it's blooming and that kind of thing. I found, you got it right. That was, and I know you researched it. I know you did. Another thing was like the housing. I think so many people do not realize, like Nell thought that the Indians were going to be living in teepees, that the Cherokees were more civilized than a lot of settlers, and that many of the Cherokee leaders were only what John Ross was, 1/8, something like 1/8 Cherokee. We went to Tahlequah several years ago and stopped at Sequoia's home, and the girl who was in the museum there, who had bright red hair and blue eyes and looked Irish, was like 1/16 Cherokee, but she was, she identified as Cherokee. And so how did you do all the research for this? I know that you had some help from David.
David Gomez is the ranger out at New Echota, and he has a library there. And so he was kind enough to let me take them home. I just loaded up And I used them because I had a lot. It took a lot of research. And finally, David called me one day, months and months later, and he said, you remember you did borrow some books from out from the library out here at New Chatham. I'd kind of like to have those back. I need them. I was so embarrassed. So I went running out there and returned them. But thank goodness that was available. And Henry Malone, Dr. Henry Malone taught my civics class in high school. I think I was like in the 8th grade, 9th grade, something like that. And he later became a professor at Georgia State College. And he wrote Cherokees of the Old South. And I used his book too, and I used Miss Lily Pitt's History of Gordon County, which was sort of second to the Bible in my house, and just other references as well. But it took a lot of research to write this book. It was hard work. Somebody who interviewed me said that I said that it was fun to write this book. It wasn't fun. I'm glad I did it, and I wanted to do it, and I did enjoy it, but it wasn't what I called fun. It was too much hard work. I'm lazy, but
Well, I think it is appropriate for all ages, not middle school. I thought it was really excellent, and I think everybody in Gordon County needs to read it.
Well, I do too.
I do, yeah, no, we do. Yes, we have a stack of books here for her to sign that we'll have at the Art Center next week. And let me see the Wooster.
Excuse me, Lee, while you're pulling that book up, I have another question for Minion.
Please.
You talked about your experience with your very first publisher. How many publishers have you had, and how do you decide when it's time to move on to a new publisher?
Well, you don't decide; they decide.
Okay.
No, the first book was published by Aurora, which was it was in Tennessee. It was a regional publisher, and they went out of business. They only did Aunt Matilda's Ghost. Then Dodd Mead did the first 3 mysteries, and then after that, Dodd Mead was sold out to St. Martin's. So St. Martin's did the rest. And then 2 of my books were done by Bella Rosa Press, which is a South Carolina press in Rock Hill.
Good.
This is from Bella Rosa.
One of the things that's discussed in the book is the Samuel Wooster case. And this is a copy of the opinion of the Supreme Court, Justice Marshall, 1832. Can you explain the Samuel Wooster case? I'm not sure I can explain it well enough.
They wanted to remove the Cherokees.
Right, yes.
Yeah, and so they had to. The Supreme Court ruled that they didn't have to leave. But then Andrew Jackson, who was president at the time, didn't pay any attention to it, and he made them leave anyway. So
and Wooster, who was the missionary, had been imprisoned.
Yeah, he and several others were imprisoned.
And of course, there was a lot of controversy among the Cherokee leaders as to whether to
there was a division in the people.
Yeah.
And some thought that they should leave, and some thought that they should stay. And there was it ended in some tragedy.
Yeah. Tell us about the title.
Well, I've always heard that there is no word for goodbye in the Cherokee language, and I wanted to be sure of this, and so I asked David and I asked other people who are in the know, and there is, as far as I know, no word for goodbye in the Cherokee language. They say things like, well, we'll see you later, or we'll see you again, but they don't say goodbye.
Well, and a couple of families in the story leave.
Yes, they do.
In the night,
and they don't say goodbye.
And don't say goodbye to,
they don't
to
say
anyone.
Goodbye.
To anyone. Well, we have Aunt Matilda's Ghost. Aunt Matilda's Ghost is a lot of fun.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's not as scary as Raven Rock,
but it's for children.
But it's for children. I know. I understand. And like she says about Augusta Goodnight, she wears these wonderful clothes and she can just do anything. And she always seems a little confused.
She is a little confused.
She seems a little confused.
Yeah. Well, so am I.
Yeah. Well, Are we all? But thank you so much for sharing with us. Anything else you want to say
Yeah,
about
thank
your
you. I have enjoyed my visit thoroughly, and
Good.
I appreciate the all the publicity. That's great.
Okay. Her books are available on Amazon. I guess most of them are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at the Harris Art Center in Calhoun, Georgia.
Mhm.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, Minion. I hope you'll come back and visit us again when you get your next book published.
Thank you.
What are you working on right now?
I'm just working on promoting this book right
Okay.
now.
Very good. All right. We're glad to have you. Thank you, ladies. So this is our murder mystery detective series and amateur sleuth week. The big question is, everyone knows that Edgar Allan Poe is credited with creating the murder mystery, the detective literary genre. But did you know the name of his very first detective story when it was published? And the name of his detective hero? Well, we'll have an answer for you at the end of the show. But now we're going to move a little bit north from Calhoun, Georgia, up to close to Charleston, West Virginia. And Mary Kay Hudson. There she is. Good morning, Mary Kay.
Good morning.
You were with us 2 weeks ago, and you started a segment on
The Night of the Hunter, Davis Grubbs' book.
And you're going to finish that up for us today?
I am. Yeah, I'm going to tell you about the real crime. Davis Grubbs' book, The Night of the Hunter, is based on a crime that was committed in 1931 in Clarksburg, West Virginia. I'll take you back to a time during the Depression. Keep in mind that people were very poor. There were a lot of widows, a lot of women that were lonely, a lot of men that were lonely too, but a lot of women that were lonely raising children on their own. And a fella up in Detroit got the idea of starting a Lonely Hearts fan club. You know, he put his ads in the magazines and things. And this, let me read one of his ads to you. Why be lonely? Register with us for a nominal fee and start corresponding with members of the opposite sex. Thousands of our members have met the ideal mate through Uncle Sam's mails. Why not you? So a fellow named Harm Drenth.
Well, you have to admit, Mary Kay, excuse me. I mean, we've got Match.com and we've got Tinder, so not much has changed in the last 90 years.
No,
except we're not writing letters anymore.
It hasn't. And the fact that there are people out there preying on people, that hasn't changed either.
No,
so this fellow named Harm Drenth, he actually was born in the Netherlands and came here with his family when he was a teenager. He had a very shaded past. He was not a real good person. Got in trouble all the time, had actually spent some time in jail. And he would cover his tracks. Keep in mind, this is 1931. He would cover his tracks by using aliases, and he had used several aliases in his lifetime. The one that he used most often was Harry Powers, and he used that alias and wrote hundreds of letters to hundreds of women, actually married one woman from Clarksburg because she had a home and a general store and a little bit of property not too far from her home.
Well, you know, I'm kind of feeling a bit of a kindred with this guy because sometimes I use the name Harry Knuckles.
Okay. If you get me laughing, I can't do this.
Okay. Settle down.
So he had impeccable English. For having come here as a teenager and being Dutch, his English was impeccable. People didn't know that he wasn't born here. They believed anything that he told them. He wrote lovely letters to women, made them feel very safe and secure. He wrote letters to a woman in Chicago named Eicher, and she agreed to meet with him. He came and picked her up in Chicago, drove her all the way to Clarksburg. Keep in mind, he had already married this woman in Clarksburg, but he had a post office box in an alias name. So his wife didn't know what, or she claims she didn't know what was going on. And the women didn't know he was married. He brought that woman back to Clarksburg, eventually went and got her children, brought them back to Clarksburg also. He did it only to get their money. They would take money out of the bank, take it with them, and he would confiscate the money, and he would. One woman he left at a gas station when she went to use the restroom. She had packed all her jewelry and money in her suitcase in the car, and he just drove off and left her there. And of course, he was using aliases, so they didn't know how to get a hold of him. Eventually, he was found out because of the woman in Chicago, because of the family. They were missed. And after doing some investigations, it led back to this Harry Powers, who lived in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And they did some investigation, but they found clothing, they found property, but they didn't find any bodies or find any crime scene. He had a garage that he had built on the property away from the, and I think there's photos. There's some old photos that I found in the West Virginia archives of the property that he owned, that he built this garage. And under the garage in the basement, that is the garage, and that is a scene after the bodies had been found. It's just a plain old, wooden building. Underneath of that building, he had a basement, and he had built a contraption where the trap door going into the basement was actually a mechanism to hang these people. And he hung 2 women and 3 children. He buried them in a ditch behind that garage. I mean, it's just really Davis Grubb's book, The Night of the Hunter, is loosely based on this crime, but Hunter's book has hope in it because the children survive in his book. The true life crime, I read a book called Quiet Dell. There have been many books written. This one's called Quiet Dell. It's written by Jane Ann Phillips, and it was the real life crime, but it was told in a novel form. So it was an interesting juxtaposition compared to The Night of the Hunter, which was a novel loosely based on the crime. Anyway, he was found out. Those are some of the books that have been written about this crime. Keep in mind, this was 1931. We didn't have serial killers back then. This was like the first serial killer that and it was during the Depression, and the means that he used to kill these women, to find these women, to steal from them, and then to kill them just for their life savings. One woman only had $1,600, and he killed her for that money. He killed a Mrs. Lemke from Massachusetts, and that's actually what he was tried for. When they dug up the ditch behind the garage, and I think there's a picture of the ditch, when they dug that ditch up and they found her body and the Eicher family, Mrs. Eicher and the 3 children, there's the ditch. And the only reason they found the body is because the fella that had recently put that ditch in for him told the police, I just put a ditch in for him. Maybe you should dig that ditch up again. It's some sort of a sewage ditch that he had put in. And that's where they were. But it was really, really sad. Some things that are in The Night of the Hunter are based on the true crime. The fact that there was a lynch mob that went after him in the Clarksburg jail when he was held in the jail, that's true. There was a lynch mob that was organized, and they did threaten to go after him. I don't know if they were running in the streets like they were in the movie, but they did have to take him to Moundsville prison, which is probably a good 2-3 hours from Clarksburg. Clarksburg's only maybe 45 minutes from where I live. And they took him up to Moundsville to hold him in that prison because he would be more secure. But because of the times, after he was only tried for the Lemke murder, and because of the time that we were living in then, He was hung the next March. So it was he was caught in 1931 and he was hung in 1932. People didn't sit on death row like they do now. And it was interesting because when he did get on the stand to testify, his his excuse for all of this was, I didn't do it. It was somebody named Mr. Rogers that did it. So he just kept claiming, he kept using these aliases. He kept claiming, there was evidence that he had taken Mrs. Lemke to Uniontown, Pennsylvania, which is just right over the line from me, about 25 minutes from here. He had taken her to Uniontown, Pennsylvania to cash a check off of her bank. They had a branch, I guess, of her bank in Uniontown. And he said that, it wasn't really him. It was Mr. Rogers that did that. And he just happened to have the money in his pocket to cover the check because the bank wouldn't cash it or something, some story like that. But yeah,
I guess it was also a time before multiple personalities, before the three faces of Eve, before we understood sociopathic personalities. It was pretty black and white. A crime is a crime. You did it, you didn't do it, you're going to pay the price or you're not.
Yeah, and I don't think he had any of those psychological problems. I think he just thought that he would get away with it by using these aliases because he'd always done that. He learned when he came to this country as a teenager that if he said it was someone else that did it, he could get away with, and he got away with a lot of crime. He did a lot of petty things. He grew up in Iowa. His father was a farmer in Iowa. That's where they settled. And that's how he got away with a lot of things, is telling, and he got away with the woman that he stole her luggage and left her at the gas station. He told the judge and the lawyer and everyone that she gave those things to him. And he got away with that. And of course, because of the times, the women were embarrassed. They didn't want their family. Here's Martha telling her sister and her family, "Oh, I'm leaving to go with this fella that I met in this mail order, friendship group." And then whenever she gets all her things stolen and she has to go home with her tail between her legs, she's embarrassed. So a lot of the women kind of made it easy for him too, because when he would do things, steal from them, they would not press charges against him. But it escalated the way it does with any criminal, any criminal behavior. Once someone gets away with something, they start getting bolder. And that's what he did. And after the trial, there were a lot of, because it was nationwide. The Quiet Dale book that I read has a character in it who's a reporter with the Chicago Tribune. And this is part of the storyline, the novel part of the story. And there were reporters from as far away as Alaska that came to West Virginia to cover this story because, it's during the Depression. This was big news. This was, your sisters, your mothers, your daughters are being taken advantage of, being manipulated because they're lonely. And so it was big news. And there were a lot of people that after the news broke and were in all the newspapers nationwide, people wrote and said, "My sister is missing. She went away with this man and this was his name." And there were things found in the Clarksburg home of Harry Powers, things with initials. And, who were these people with these initials? Where are they now? So there were a lot of missing women that he preyed on. And there were a lot of people think there are more bodies. There's more people that he did harm to. But because he was hung right after the trial, there's no way. And he probably wouldn't have owned up to it anyway.
Yeah. Once again, truth is stranger than fiction.
It is.
And then the fiction writers take advantage of that and turn it into a book.
Yeah. And I highly recommend, I hope that these segments, my hope is that people will go, read the book, do the research, at least read the book, because the books are good. The Night of the Hunter is a fantastic story, and I love this book. Not just because he's from Moundsville and wrote this book, but I really, it's a good story. And the Quiet Dale book by Jane Ann Phillips is a very good story too. I like the way she wrote the story. She uses one of the Iker children in the story as kind of an angel that hovers throughout the story. And it's very interesting how she did that. She did a good job, and she covered the real life crime pretty factual. I mean, it's very factual the way she covered it. So,
a lot of strings through today's show. A lot of angels making an appearance in a book.
Yeah.
Well, you've really stretched yourself, Mary Kay. Normally, you've been talking to us about illustrators. Your last 2 visits, you've shared with us the stories of these horrific and well-written murders in West Virginia. You going to get it back on track next time and share some more illustrations with us?
You know what I'm going to talk about next time?
I have no idea.
Interesting. Do you remember your interview you did with Carrie Schroeder?
I do, yeah.
I was so impressed with her. I love her work. And she offered a workshop online. And
Okay.
I am taking the Zoom workshop right now. It's 4 sessions. I've already had 2 sessions. Remember the magic box that she showed us with the thaumatrope and the Vobel? And
right.
So, here's my thaumatrope. Yeah. I love flexagons. When she mentioned flexagons, this is one of the flexagons that I have made. I'm going in the wrong direction. And
how cool! I saw one of her books appear in a book dealer's catalog recently, and it was one that she had on her website. I sent her a link to the catalog, and she was quite surprised that she's been so institutionalized.
Yeah, well, it's a great workshop, and she asked us Thursday. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she asked us Thursday how we heard about it, and I said, well, I saw you on Rare Book Cafe and signed up for your workshop, and I said, in a couple of weeks I'm going to be talking about your work, and she's like, oh no, not a critique. And I'm like, I'm not going to critique the workshop. I just want to talk about it. So that's what
we do here. We bring people together. We bring book lovers together. We bring rare books together, book artists together. And I'm glad that you were able to connect with her.
Yeah. She's really a good teacher, and I'm learning a lot. And I've done some of this stuff before, but there's always something new, especially with young people. Like Carrie, they're getting all that new stuff. And so it's good to have an open mind and welcome all that new information. And
nimble fingers.
Yeah. Well, she's a very sharing artist. And a lot of, I'm not that familiar with book artists, but a lot of artists are a little selfish with their knowledge because they're afraid you're going to learn their secrets, and which is crazy because it's all been done before. But she's very sharing. She's a really good teacher, so I'm enjoying it. But that's what I'm going to talk about in a couple of weeks. I'm going to show you what I did and tell you about the workshop.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of like love. The more you share it, the bigger it gets.
Yeah, that's how I hope it is. Yeah.
All right, Mary Kay Watson. We appreciate having you, and thanks for your 2-part series. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
All right. Now, everybody, let me remind you what our question of the week is. Edgar Allan Poe is credited with creating murder mystery detective literary genre, but did you know that his very first detective story, when it was published, and the name of his detective hero? We're going to have an answer for you after our next couple of segments. And our first one, we're glad to have with us this week our associate producer, Lynn Thompson, on the author of Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown. Goodnight Moon is probably on the list of every favorite children's book ever written. Goodnight Moon. Reader's Digest listed it first in a recent article, the 25 best children's books ever written. It was published in 1947, making it older than me and just about everyone associated with the Rare Book Cafe. Lynn Thompson comes to us almost every week with the story behind the story, and we're glad to have him live. Lynn? There he is. You're looking comfortable in that wingback chair. Okay, do we have a bit of an audio problem there? We're gonna check out the audio situation with Lynn right now. Lynn, I've been following Lynn on Facebook. Lives in a lovely, mature home in Southern California. He's been doing some yard work, and amazingly enough, he's been digging up the yard and finding brick pavements. This is a bit of an archaeological mystery that Lynn will solve for us soon. But until he does, maybe we should move on to things found in old book. Let me check with our producer here, Alan, and see if we've fixed the audio or if we should move on to the next segment. Shall we bring Lynn Thompson back just to see how he's doing? Okay, here we go. Things found in old books by our friend David Hess from the Orange Man Bookstore in California. Take it away, David.
Hello, this is David from the Bookman in Orange, California, welcoming you to this week's segment of Things Found in Old Books. And I'm happy to say I have a nice little crop of things found that I'm going to share with you. Plus, one person sent something in, so we get to share that as well. I'm very excited. So let's get started right away. First off, in this rather tattered old book, that's an old Western, The Thunderer by Barrington, I think. I can't really read that. Anyway, in this old book, it doesn't match the card. And what I found in the book was a business card like this. Now, I'm a big fan of finding business cards in books. I think they're really cool because a lot of times they're of businesses long gone and so forth. And so, but they always have a certain look. And I did a little research on this one. It's for Art S. Leach, Realtor. And now Art Leach Realtor, I did a little research online, and apparently they just kind of went out of business in 2018. So, and he was kind of a big wig in the San Diego area realtor circles. He was the chairman of the board for a while. And but the card belongs to a Bud Eminger. So he was a worker there for Art. And the card opens up. It's closed. It opens up. I guess you can set it on a table or something like that, you know. And it tells you what he does here. And then he has the different offices listed here. And again, the phone numbers are all those early phone numbers with letters in the number. And they're pretty short, like W6175 is one of the phone numbers, W6175. And from what I can tell, again, doing a little research, this is from 1955. So not spectacular, but again, I'm a big fan of the business card, so I want to share it with you because I just love finding business cards in books. So that's number one. Number two was this paperback. I was going through a box of paperbacks that someone brought in or left at our store. We get a lot of donations, and so it's a book on Nino Cochise, the first 100 years, written by Ciye, C-I-Y-E, Cochise. Now, I was almost going to throw this out. In fact, when I was lifting up the book to share it today, the whole cover popped off. The thing is fairly bad shape. But on the inside of the cover that popped off is a signature of the authors, C-I-Y-E, Ciye. I hope I'm doing it right, the name, Ciye Cochise. Signed it there on the inside of the cover of this paperback. But further inspection of the book, I found this envelope there. And the envelope obviously has a history that I can't quite follow. the gentleman here from Santa Ana, California, out here near me, sent this to Chief Saeed Cochise in Arizona, to the Arizona Sonora Museum. But it says not at this address, and return to sender, and on the back it's post dated 1974. But inside the envelope that was apparently sent back is a picture of doing a certain, there we go. That's a Saeed Cochise sitting at a table with somebody. He's got a cigar. He's sitting there looking very comfortable, and he has a big smile on his face. And so I'm assuming the picture is also from the 1974 era. And so apparently either the guy was sending this to him to get signed, or somehow he got this and sent it back. I don't know. But there it is, the envelope, the picture, the signature on the book. And I don't know how I'll preserve that, or if anybody would be interested. I think I like it. Anyway, next in line, I found in this book here, which is not, it's it's a book, but it's more of an annual for a college, and it's from the annual is signed 1895, Mount Holyoke College, which is in Massachusetts. And it's an old annual. It's not the kind of annual that has a lot of pictures in it as far as individual pictures, but it has pictures of groups and things like that. And here's, like, of a special interest to me is this picture of the Banjo Club. I'm sorry. Anyway, the reason why, because in this annual here of the Banjo Club is this little program that was also in the annual. Mount Holyoke College Glee and Banjo Club, Memorial Hall, Worcester, May 4th, 1897. It's a program to the Banjo and Glee Club performances in 1897. And, it's a list of the songs they're going to perform. Can't say that I recognize any of them. But and then here's a member of the Glee Club and a member of the Banjo Club, and we see a picture there of the Banjo Club. So apparently these players are in the picture. And and there's an ad for mandolins on the back, Eclipse mandolins. But what I found amazing about this particular program is that it feels to me like it's been in the annual since 1897. I mean, it's so pristine, unsoiled, not, the edges are really crisp and tight. It's like it's just been sitting there, waiting to be discovered again. And it's in beautiful shape. You'd hardly even know it's from 1897. But I felt that was a super, I'd say a super duper find. Anyway, and lastly, for the things that I came across, this is really, really interesting. It's quite fascinating. Now this book here is the Memorial Life of William McKinley, published after his assassination. And you see these kind of books a lot. They printed them in the day of. They have one for the Titanic. They have one for the Johnston flood. They were sensationalist books at the time, or not sensationalist, would they capitalize on a national tragedy or something like that, and they would publish these books. And so they do show up quite often, but they look very interesting. And in this, I found something I've never ever come across. It's a box of 5-cent cigars for 5 cents. And what that means, according to this little googad here, is that what you do is you buy this booklet here for you buy it for 50 cents. You buy the booklet and you get 4 coupons. And what you do is you sell a coupon to a friend. And once that friend fills it out and sends it in, then they send you another. Once it's confirmed that they've bought them and sent them in, you get a 5-cent cigar box for 5 cents. So I imagine there's a bunch of cigars in it, and they. I'm sorry, but the back part fell off, and recently, clumsy me. And it has an order blank on the back for the brands of cigars that you can get, and so it's kind of like a pyramid scheme, a little Ponzi scheme going on there. So they want you to buy the coupons, sell to your friends, and then you get your product. So you get now in this book here that I have, all 4 coupons are intact. So this gentleman didn't do his job. He just decided, to hell with it, I'll go to another store and buy a cigar. Put it in the book, and now it's mine. Anyway, that's all I have for today. However, I would like to share something found in used books sent to me from a watcher here on this program. And it came from Lee Lynn of Ridge Books in Georgia. And let me read what she wrote. And I'll also put up the pictures that she sent, and we'll share with you. It says, "Hi, David. I always enjoy things found in books, but I had forgotten this gem until I had an order for the book today. A paperback copy of James Campbell's This is the Beat Generation, University of California, first paperback edition, 2001, with the distinctive signature of Ferlinghetti, of Lawrence Ferlinghetti, on the title page, and 2 sticky notes in his handwriting indicating errors in the book regarding city lights. And I suppose he should have known." That is awesome. I really enjoy that. And what a find that is, huh? So thanks again. I do appreciate it. And if any of you have anything that you would like to share, I'd be overjoyed to present it here on Things Found in Books. If you want to share those items, send them to oldbook@ebookman.com. That's oldbook@ebookman.com. That's all I have for today. And this is David from the Bookman in Orange, California. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
But I was wrong, because it was quickly followed by a cigar pyramid scheme. The things you learn on the Rare Book Cafe. All right, everybody, we'd like to welcome our associate producer, Lynn Thompson. Lynn is going to speak to us about the author of Goodnight Moon, Margaret Wise Brown. Hello, Lynn. And I'm not getting Lynn's audio. How about you, Alan? Lynn, can you hear me? Nod your head. Okay. There we go. I think we got you now.
And thank you for having me on again. And I tell people that here in Chester, I live outside of time, and trying to connect with the show today proves it once again. Well, I can hear. So I will just assume. Okay. Well, the
Kind of
good
fading in
news
and out.
is you didn't miss anything.
Okay.
But I want to talk a little bit about children's authors. They're among my favorites, if only because I admire people who stand up to the idea that old people should rule the world even when they're dead. And a good children's author opens up the future rather than the past to the kids who are going to have to live in the future. And one of my favorites is the woman I call the wild child of children's lit, Margaret Wise Brown. Now, everybody, is probably safe to say, knows the book Goodnight Moon. The text is a rhyming poem of about 130 words, and it describes a small bunny's bedtime ritual of saying good night to everything in its room. Inanimate and living objects like a red balloon, a pair of socks, the bunny's dollhouse, a bowl of mush, and two kittens, among others. And despite the kittens, a mouse is present in each spread in the book. The book begins at 7 p.m. and ends at 8:10 p.m., with each spread being spaced 10 minutes apart, as measured by the two clocks in the room and reflected in the rising moon through the window. The illustrations alternate between two-page black and white spreads of objects and two-page color spreads of the room. Like the other books in the series, and this was a common cost-saving technique during World War II. Brown based Goodnight Moon on her own childhood ritual of saying goodnight to the toys and other objects in the nursery she shared with her sister Roberta. That memory came back to her in a vivid dream as an adult. The text she jotted down upon waking is at once both cozy and unsettling, mimicking and inducing the unmoored feeling that comes with drifting away to sleep. And unlike so many children's books with their pat plots and clumsy didactics, it's also one that parents can stand rereading, and not only for its soporific effect on their sons and daughters, but like most best-selling books, it nearly wasn't a success at all, and that brings me to the story behind the story of Margaret Wise Brown. Her grandfather, B. Gratz.
Okay, are we having some audio difficulties with Lynn still? It appears that we are. We might have some internet issues there in Southern California. Well, folks, I think that may bring us to an early close of the show. Earlier in the show, I asked you what was the first short story written by Edgar Allan Poe. And the answer, of course, is The Murders in the Rue Morgue. The story first appeared in Graham's Lady and Gentleman's Magazine in April 1841. Poe was the literary editor of the magazine, and what better way to get your published stories out there than to do it yourself? The magazine, however, saw some other leading writers of the day, including James Fenimore Cooper, William Cullen Bryant, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and James Russell Lowe. The Murders in the Rue Morgue marked the very first appearance of the amateur detective C. Auguste Dupin, the French detective whose powers of observation and deduction set the standard for the detective genre. Edgar Allan Poe's work has been reprinted over and over again, of course, and is widely available, but you might have to look a little bit harder to find copies of the original story in Graham's magazine. We found an exquisitely bound set of a year's worth of Graham's, including The Murders in the Rue Morgue and other stories by Poe, listed with our friends on ABE Books for $7,500. Whoa! 7,500 smackers for a short story? Yeah, that's right. Very collectible. Okay, everybody, there you have it. Edgar Allan Poe and Murders in the Rue Morgue, 1841, the model of murder and detective genre. And that genre continued on with guests, with folks like our guest Mignon Ballard, with Agatha Christie, and so many of the other famous and favorite detective writers. There she is. Welcome back. You're still with us, ladies. Mignon, had you ever read any of Edgar Allan Poe when you were growing up?
Yes, I did. I loved it. I love mysteries. I read Agatha Christie.
Yeah, it's great when an author, as yourself, brings a detective through a half a dozen or a handful of books, and the readers can establish a relationship with that detective.
Right. Of course, we all started with Nancy Drew.
And let's see, the Bobbsey twins,
And the Bobbsey twins.
and the
Bobbsey
Happy
twins.
Hollisters,
The Hardy Boys.
and the Hardy Boys.
And the Hardy
yes.
Boy. There you
Yes.
go.
I read them all.
I don't write detective books, but I sure do read a lot of them.
I think Agatha Christie was always my favorite because there was always some good movies that went along with them.
Mm-hmm. True.
We were also commenting that we had Goodnight Moon memorized. Mignon and I did.
Grandchildren.
From children and grandchildren.
I was going to say, well, you have children, so you have an excuse
Yes.
and a reason to do that.
Yes, we could probably do a little, oral interpretation of Goodnight Moon if we had to.
Well, there are so many good children's authors and children illustrators. We've spoken about the Newbery Medal and the Caldecott Award on this show just about a month ago, and the genre continues.
Good.
Minion, how old are your grandchildren? Have they picked up your books?
Oh, they're grown. I think I have 3 already out of college. And
Okay.
you know what? They don't read my books. I don't know why.
Shame on them.
They don't. But
Well,
I've told them,
terrible.
I said, okay, you will not be inheriting the $2.98. Your loss.
that's right. No more royalty checks for them.
No, they did read Aunt Matilda's Ghost, though, when they were little.
I'm sure they did. But I can't imagine that they didn't.
Well, I have a signed copy of No Word for Goodbye for Clara, my granddaughter, who is a little young yet. She's 8, but she's reading anything she wants to read. She's, she reads well enough to pick up on almost anything.
Give her another year or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Lee, you weren't with us in person last week because you went to the outdoor art
That's right.
festival. How'd that
I did.
go?
It was a beautiful day, 70 something degrees and a breeze, and about 15 artists. And the Chattooga Garden Club was selling pimento cheese sandwiches for lunch. And, around here, pimento cheese sandwiches are practically a food group. So it was a lovely afternoon, and I have some pictures I'm going to share, I hope. Whoops, sorry.
While you're putting that up, let me just notify our visitors that we did apparently have some technical difficulties with Lynn, but he will be back with the continuation or the rerun of the Margaret Wise Brown story next week.
Well, it didn't work. Hold on. Last week it worked.
I'm probably jinxing you.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Okay.
Did your son sell any artworks last week?
He did. He sold a few pieces, and I bought some. Go get the bowl out of the living room, the red bowl that's on that little table.
Okay.
Mignon's gonna go fetch one of the pieces. Okay, I'm gonna leave.
Okay, you might need to switch pages there, Lee.
I bought a pottery bowl, and it's done with a resist method of glazing, like batik is done with wax, done with wax and rubber, and it's really pretty. And I bought these earrings, which are clay. Oh, here's the bowl. All right, these are, I think I mentioned last week about the Passaquan beads. This is my Passaquan beads. So here's the bowl that I bought last week.
That's beautiful.
The artist's name is Leonard McEwen from Franklin, Georgia. And you can tell by the pattern of the glaze, how it was blocked off and then glazed.
Sure.
So this is what I bought. It was a nice afternoon. I had pictures of Will's booth, but I don't seem to be able to bring them up. Let's see. But he did sell a few things. Had a little 12-year-old come by the booth, and she was picking up pieces of art and asking him how much they were, and they were way out of her price range. And he would say, well, that's 30 or that's 50 or whatever. And she finally picked up this tiny little painting and asked him how much it was. And I think it was priced at 15. And he said, $5? So she bought it. So she got a piece to take home.
I had a similar rewarding experience. I was in a bookstore just yesterday, and a little boy had $2 to buy a book. And I saw out of the corner of my eye Hatchet, which was one of both of my son's favorite books growing up. And I just couldn't resist buying it for him and saying, there you go. You're going to enjoy this a whole lot more than $2.
Yeah. Well, my grandchildren had book fairs at their school last week, and it was buy one, get one free day. And so they made their money stretch quite a long ways. Quite a long ways. But that's good. That's good. Buy more books. Buy more books.
Buy more books and read more books and listen to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. We've had another good week of guests, and we're looking forward to having you back next week at 12:30 Eastern Time. And check into our show on podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are given away. Thank you, Minion Ballard. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
And thanks for a great segment. Lee?
Yes?
Lindsey Thompson will be posting his segment, and he will be back with us next week, hopefully without some technical difficulties. That's it for this week, folks. Thanks for joining us. May your readings be happy.
Look, I got my name on.
Good for you.